Hello and welcome back to the From My Perspective podcast, where I, Jackson McCarty, tell you all the names you need to know in the college football and NFL landscapes that could be changing the football landscape in the very near future. So, last episode, if you missed it, we went over realignment of the conferences, kind of where I thought things were going to shake out, following all these teams making the adjustments and the jumps and the leaps to different conferences. Well, now we're actually looking at the current conferences as they stand, but in a slightly different light. I could come in here and rank them by talent from the players and just general team performance aspect, but I decided to focus this one on the coaches. I wanted to rank all of the Power 5 coaches today based on conference and which conference comes out the strongest and who unfortunately is at the bottom. The next episode will be the group of 5 ones, plus we'll throw in the independent as well since they need some representation. Let's not waste any time here. Let's just go ahead and jump into number 5. We'll be starting at the bottom and working our way up. The ACC is kind of the focal point for me here. You have Dabo Swinney, Mario Cristobal's there now, and outside of that, I'm questioning a whole lot of things. You've got Pat Narduzzi, who has looked decent, but his results are inconsistent. Norvell's still trying to build a program. Matt Brown, he's a legend, but I don't know why he needs to be coaching right now. You know, UNC doesn't look like some hard hitter right now. They have gotten worse every year, I believe, or I believe they went up a win or two in 2020 and then came back down last year. Either way, he's not winning them a ton of games, no matter how great his name is. It's not really, it doesn't look like a long-term beneficial thing for UNC. Dave Doran is underrated, but I couldn't put him on that level of Mario Cristobal and Dabo Swinney. It just there's so many questions just throughout the ACC right now, and if I would have been including the AAC in this, they may still have come last. And because if you're really concerned about things being top heavy, the AAC, and we'll talk plenty more about them in the not too distant future, they've got, I would think, more consistency throughout, and the ACC rather is not. They don't have that right now. So this one was pretty easy and pretty cut and dry for me to select, just because the ACC is kind of in a weird state right now, both as far as, like, I think that they probably could have ranked at the bottom of this or next to bottom as far as team performance, like who I thought was going to be the best overall conference, but they still come in last at the coaching, and I think that that's where a lot of those issues stem from. For number 4, we go to the Pac-12, and I know you just got Lincoln Riley. You're really proud of your bright and shiny new object, but how much of what's past him do you love? Mario Cristobal is gone. Chip Kelly. He's having a resurgence. UCLA looks great under him, a lot better than I would have expected them to. David Shaw has a career history of being good. You can't forget about Kyle Whittingham. He's very talented as a head coach. But I think that they've got a lot more presence at the top, especially with Lincoln Riley there now. It helps. If you'll notice, he is still below the conference he just left. But it's really just a matter of strange situations outside of it. Like, look at Herm Edwards in Arizona State right now. I think you could probably define them as questionable at best with everything that's gone on this offseason and the general status around the team. Maybe Emory Jones keeps them. I believe they had 8 wins last year. Maybe he comes in and keeps them in that same ballpark. I'm not going to be the one betting on that. And then when you look past it, Kalen DeBoer, Dorrell, Wilcox, Fish, it's all just kind of meh. I'm not particularly interested in it. I can't imagine that the people who watch college football from a top 25 and maybe your team or maybe a couple of those bubble teams, I can't imagine any of them are looking at that and saying, you know what, this is actually a pretty solid conference, because odds are they've probably never heard of those 4 guys I just mentioned. The Pac-12 has a lot of work to do. I do think it will improve, mostly because teams will have to improve their situations to match what's going on at USC. Dan Lanning for Oregon, we'll have to see if he works out. Utah, Kyle Whittingham, they're going to be good. But like, if you want to really have a leg up in this conference, I think you're going to have to start drawing in a lot of talent and a lot of coaching talent specifically. And I just don't think that that's there yet. I think that they've still got a year or two to worry about it. And it's not just super pressing at this very moment because we don't know if USC is going to be this world beater team. If they can just carry over what was happening in Oklahoma, yeah, they're going to win the Pac-12. But if they don't, you've at least got that minute to figure out and say, we're going to give this guy one more shot, and then maybe we move on, or just kind of evaluate your options for another year, especially because we didn't know Lincoln was actually going to pull the trigger on this move. So I think the Pac 12 will rise on this list. But you're going to have plenty of competition as far as going up in the ranks, especially from conferences like the Big 12, who I have ranked at number 3. Next year, I believe, they'll add Luke Fickell and Dana Holgerson and Gus Malzahn. But even without those 3 coaches, who I do think are really impactful, I still have them at the middle of the pack of the Power 5 conferences. Of course, Lincoln hurts you, at least in the short term. You're going to get that value back soon enough. And that didn't factor into these rankings, but it does help and give me a little bit of peace of mind whenever I'm designing this list. But you still got Venables, who I like. I'm going to die on that hill, and until he proves me wrong that I shouldn't like him as much as I do as a head coach, I'm going to keep saying that Brent Venables is among this top tier of coaches. And I know that's absurd without him really head coaching ever, but I'm taking it. Gundy is there. Sonny Dykes just moved into the conference. Dave Aranda. They're all really, really good coaches. And I think you can still potentially get a little bit of draw from Steve Sarkisian. We don't know what he's going to be. Chris Kleiman, we don't know what he's going to be. There's 2 major factors that could, for one, they could definitely bottom out the conference if both of them fail. And we're really just looking at these top 4 and maybe, some other guys that kind of work their way up, then maybe you're not as inspired as what the Pac-12 can start stringing together. But as of right now, I would absolutely pick the Venables, Gundy, Sonny Dykes, Dave Aranda listing, and then take my bet on Steve Sarkisian to work out. I just think it's very solid. They don't like a true headliner. Like, I don't think anybody's getting just super excited that Mike Gundy is there. But he's a great coach. He's not a headliner. Dave Aranda, not a headliner. Sonny Dykes, not a headliner. So unless they get one of those, they'll probably have to stay in that 3 to 4 range. Because I do believe, and you'll see with these other 2, the 2 that are above them, that a headliner does matter. It really, really does. Because if you don't have a coach that you're watching and you're like, okay, so this guy is going to be one for the history books, then, it takes a little bit of the luster away. And as you can see with another conference we'll be talking about soon, a lot of people will watch just to see if this guy finally loses because it's so uncommon. They don't really have that in the Big 12 right now. So that would mark number 3 for me. Like I said, they've got a lot of maneuverability. I would think that they're the most fluid conference on this list. One conference that I don't really see adjusting too much. I think it's pretty set in stone, but what they do have set in stone is pretty inspiring, and that's the Big Ten, who comes in at number 2. When you've got Jim Harbaugh, you've got Ryan Day, you've got Kirk Ferentz, PJ Fleck, James Franklin, that top 5 is really, really good, and that's not even including Mel Tucker, Paul Chryst, Pat Fitzgerald. It's a really deep conference, and I do think that there is if anybody is going to catch up to number 2, you've got to do a lot of work, because I believe it is 1, slightly below them is 2, and then you've got quite a little bit to go until you hit 3, 4, and 5, which I do think 3, 4, and 5 are all pretty close together. But no, the Big Ten as a whole, you've got so much at the top and in the middle, because technically it does have to kind of extend into the middle. The real issue is that the bottom is really, really low. Like, I get that somebody has to be losing in the conference, but Brett Bielema and Tom Allen, Illinois and Indiana respectively, it is not inspiring. We've seen Bielema at Arkansas, and that didn't really work out too well for him. Tom Allen just strung together like a 2-10 season. Indiana lost Michael Penix Jr. There's just there's so much just meh at the bottom of the conference that it does take a little bit of the sour off. But at the end of the day, if you are just looking at number ones, I think that they could have been the number one. As far as if we're just putting top five versus top five, here we go. I think that they would very much hold their own. Like I said, they might even win that competition if it came down to it. But fortunately for number one, it does not just come down to it. It has to encompass everyone in the conference, which makes this one pretty easy when you're considering both guys you have at the top, guys who are working their way up, some stalwarts it's the SEC. It's so cut and dry for me. And it does make me sound, well, if the accent doesn't already, it makes me sound a little bit like an SEC homer. And I promise I'm not. The SEC has such a leg up right now with recruiting and drawing all these big talents just because they are historically a very impressive program. Alabama is constantly winning national championships. You're getting LSU, who won one not too long ago. Georgia just won one. Florida's always an appealing job. You get so much talent coming in, and it's really reflective in their coaching staffs. I mean, Nick Saban, duh, obvious. You've got Kirby Smart, duh. I mean, national champion winner. I like Kiffin, Jimbo Fisher, Brian Kelly. I'm not even that much of a Brian Kelly guy. I think he's probably a top 20 coach, but I mean, he's got the legacy, and you've got somebody with a very good win percentage coming to a monstrous program in LSU. Josh Heupel, Sam Pittman, Mark Stoops, the list just keeps going as far as guys you feel good about, and even the guys who maybe you don't know what to think about them yet, but there's some intrigue. You've still got Shane Beamer, Brian Harsin, Billy Napier, Eli Drakewitz. It's like wow, it's like a high roller league. Like, you don't get in there without being really good at your job. And it's very clear that everyone in the SEC would be a top 4 or 5 head coach in most other conferences. If we took, let's replace Mark Stoops, who I would have probably around the 7 to 8 mark. Actually, no, I would have him a little bit higher than that. Let's call it Josh Heupel, what he's doing with Tennessee. If you planted him and his team in the Big 12, he might be the headliner that the Big 12 needs to move up. If you did that with Sam Pittman, I think you get the same results. There's so much depth and true talent. I mean, you've even got your Mike Leach, your older gimmicky, his unique offensive style that shouldn't really work in the SEC, but with the talent you can get in there, he's making something happen. Will Rogers has looked good to this point. Mississippi State has surpassed my expectations for them as a program when he came in. It's so talent rich, and it's hard to beat them, and that's why a lot of kids go there, because it starts with who you can learn under. And of course, not everybody is going to have this perfect record because you can't in the same conference. But man, to be a SEC head coach, especially when you're looking at those jobs, I don't blame guys like Lincoln Riley for leaving, because you know what you're having to go up against. And unless you're in one of those, like the Alabama with what Nick Saban's built, Florida, LSU, Georgia, one of those powerhouse recruiting schools, Texas A&M, it's going to be hard for you to win unless you're a really good head coach. And that's what we're seeing from Kiffin, Heupel, and Stoops, and the list, and Pittman, and the list goes on and on. So it's really impressive to see how much talent they can get there. And I don't think that this one will change, even though I do think the Big Ten is close as far as headliners go. I don't think that they touch them beyond that. So what do you think? How would you change this list around if there's anybody that maybe you would switch around? Maybe you have the Big 10 and Big 12 a different way. Maybe you have the Pac-12 and Big 12 switched around. I'd love to hear about it, either in the comments or on my Twitter. Both of those will be linked below. But that has been episode 11 from the From My Perspective podcast. And as always, I'll see you next time.